Well, hi.
Hello.
Gentle listeners, you might think that we'd abandoned you, but really, longtime gentle listeners will know that these summer doldrums, when we just go radio quiet, that's not a word, radio quiet for several weeks, and then come back like nothing. What podcast interruption? No, this just means the world's getting back to normal because H.A. Conrad's job requires that she works for an entire month straight.
Pretty
Like,
much.
so between work and vacation and other things, yes, we've been gone for several weeks. Yes, it was in the middle of a serial review on Dead City, but we're back, and we're now there's actually a good backlog of content that we have to talk about. So this should carry us through. But hi, yeah, my name's Stuart, and you heard the dulcet tones of H.A. Conrad coming through your ear pipes just a minute ago. But H.A. Conrad, hi, how are you?
Hello. I'm good. The normal stuff going on with aging. Managed to have a back injury, so that's exciting.
Ooh.
I know it's like yay. Um, but other than that, great. And psyched to be back and talking about all this fun stuff. And I'm glad that there is actually a backlog because there was like thin pickings for a while.
It's still slim
Yep.
pickings out there. I'm worried we'll hit up this slight backlog and then be like, oh, right. There's still no Train to Busan sequel or Last Train from New York news. There's still no Salem's Lot news, as far as I can tell. Like those two
I
movies, I
think,
think have just disappeared.
yeah, I think that's gonna be gone for a while.
However, Zom 100 Bucket List of the Dead is out in anime and live action. One as a show, one as a movie. I believe the live action is the movie on Netflix right now. You've also got the Zombie Verse. Is that what it's called?
Yep.
Reality show. I haven't seen any of these things. I've been kind of waiting. I don't know if we're gonna look at them all together or not. We've got Daryl Dixon's show coming soon. I forget kind of when. Is it next year or this fall?
No, I thought it
Uh,
was this fall. I think it's
yeah,
October.
I think it is this fall because the next year show is the We're the Ones Who Are Alive or whatever. I'm butchering the name of that one, but that's the Rick and Michonne show. Uh, those are all stacking up here. As well as in theory, all of us are dead. Season 2. No news on Kingdom season 3. And with all of the people who work on that show doing makeup and effects for that reality show, which was a news item we came up with before. I don't know when we can expect that, but that's kind of, I feel like that's the landscape of upcoming projects. There are here and there a couple of others. There's that weird like Dan Aykroyd Chevy Chase zombie movie. Have you been seeing those articles about that?
Yeah, but I'm not sure about that. We'll have to see what happens with that. I
Like
don't know.
Chevy Chase
Hey.
is occupies a weird space in my head now where it's like, oh, I don't really know if I want to watch him. However, in the actual news that I decided to read articles on, there was a heartfelt editorial from Bloody Disgusting appealing to the heartless overlords at Netflix that season 3 of Black Summer needs to happen, and the fans of that show deserve a third season. That means nothing to executives at streamers, of course. Did you read any of this editorial?
I did, I thought it was a nice plea. I doubt they'll listen, but I thought it was a great plea, and I agree. Like, I think this was one of the better made shows, that we've seen in a long time. It was very tight. I think there's still definitely story to tell, as it left it closed the loop, but it did definitely leave. There's stories that are still left to tell, and that would be fun to tell and see. But I don't know. I kind of feel like that whole thing that I think that the creator said something on Twitter or something like that, and I think that's probably the death knell. But
Yeah,
you
the John
know,
Hyams saying it was a slim chance that it's going to
yeah,
make a third
yeah, I
season.
think that's pretty much zero chance.
In the
But
comments, I noticed somebody wrote like, "Why doesn't Shudder take it over?" Maybe I don't know if Shudder has the amount of support or funding to do a show like Black Summer, but they've done other original
they
series.
have, but I don't know that they have the budget to do it the level that Netflix did because they poured a ton of money into that particular show. So we'll see. But then again, Maybe we'll see 28 years later. You never know.
Oh
So,
God, we'll be talking about that the next time that the Alex Garland or Danny Boyle drop a subtle hint to the press. Well, I'm sure that'll come up
well,
soon.
speaking of 28 days later, it is nowhere to be found on any streaming service right now.
Curious.
Yeah.
That happens to projects every so often, though. But like,
It
yeah,
does, but I was very upset and annoyed, and more so that I hadn't bought it, which I'm surprised at myself that I haven't. But part of this is because I, of course, watched Oppenheimer with Cillian Murphy, and it made
ah,
me want to watch all things Cillian Murphy. And so I was like, 28 days later, that I haven't watched that in a bit. And it is nowhere to be found. And it's in one of those things like it was on I know, I'm thinking of Kyle right now in my head. It was on HBO Max, which is now just Max, I guess. Last fall, and it is gone. It is nowhere to be found for the moment. I'm hoping maybe somebody is able to grab it or pick up the licensing for it, or get the permission to stream it, just given how popular Oppenheimer has been, and maybe all things Cillian Murphy are being negotiated now. I don't know, but
interesting.
I was really like a little ticked off. I would like to see it, so I guess I could find a DVD somewhere. Though where to play it, I don't know.
That is wild. You can't even buy it on Amazon.
No, nowhere.
So maybe if you like VPN or tour yourself into another country, that'll have the rights in Australia or the UK or something.
Maybe, but still seems a little bit curious. In any case, that's my tangent about 28 days later. And 28 years later, and there is other kind of Walking Dead news, right?
Well, yeah, I saw this trailer. I saw it on social media, and here's a Polygon article that, well, yeah, we don't have really publicly accessible show notes anymore, but there's an article on Polygon.com about this new Walking Dead Destinies game that's coming out sometime. It's going to be on PC and play the consoles. It's not a mobile game, although for the life of me, it looked like a mobile game when I was looking at the trailer. Um, and what's interesting, I'd say the hook of this game, like its pitch, is you can either be Shane or Rick and decide who dies in that fateful meeting in the fields outside of the farmhouse in season 2, and then play it as if Shane was the leader of the dictatorship, with Rick actually being dead. So that seems to be their main hook to get you to play. Like, what if Shane?
What if Shane was the leader or whatever it was?
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, I feel like the argument is, well, Rick basically became more and more like Shane throughout the series anyway. So would Shane have just been like even further extreme than that at all times? I don't know.
I mean, look, I always thought it was odd, like, Shane knew he had been having an affair with Rick's wife and stuff like that. So I don't know. I kind of thought it was weird that he wouldn't have taken out Rick in the first place. But so I think that this is plausible.
Plausible that
But
Shane would have killed Rick.
yeah,
Yeah, of course. Of course. Absolutely. It's just that's not how it played out. But in this game, maybe it is. So that'll be worth, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'll pick it up or not. It kind of depends on the price point. I'm not sure where it's coming out, but it might be worth checking when that comes out in, no idea. I'm trying to look it up and I can't see. All right, but however, so there's the Walking Dead Destinies game. Other news on deadline.com, George Romero, Twilight of the Dead, the final chapter of his septology. I don't know how many of the Dead movies are there.
there's a lot of the Dead movies. I don't know how, like, we've talked about this a couple of times, and, you know, ostensibly the script for this is something Romero worked on before he died. And the project is sort of being green lit by his widow. But other people are taking it over. And I guess, I'm all excited about something if it's actually like real, but there's no sort of sense of how finished this was or what would be, I don't know. Like, part of me worries that this is, and probably is, like sort of a money grab. But looking at like some of the things that they're saying, they're like, oh, we could do like multiple films from this stuff or like offshoots of this. And I don't know, did you like, I felt a little like, after reading this article about it.
I guess I'm not picking up on all of those details.
There is very little, I guess my thing is that there is very little like that we saw a little bit of this before, just like, oh, they're working on this project, whatever. And then it's like, oh no, and so are taking this over. And oh, it's definitely like a Romero project, but it
We've
doesn't
talked about like his daughter taking on a project. We've talked about there's it feels like there's 3 or 4 different things that have come up,
right. And it's like,
and none of them have landed though. Like none of
no,
them have actually come out. And I don't think they're all this. They're all like different things
right.
too.
And that's the thing. It's like you attach the Romero name to things and people are like, ooh, and I am one of them, definitely one of them. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I just don't know if this is actually a project he actually did, because it feels like the details are incredibly sparse. I mean,
Well, this is Deadline. They never have details, but
right, but this is,
the setting is kind of interesting.
yeah. So go, it's on an island, right? Like,
The like basically the final remnants of humanity are on an island, a tropical island, and they're caught in a conflict between different factions of zombies, which it does feel like the logical conclusion in a way of where Romero is taking his stuff in a way, right?
well, because he
Um,
had what, Big Daddy was the
yeah,
zombie in the last in Land of the Dead.
yeah,
So
for all the
probably
good that
that
did us.
idea.
And that movie wasn't great, but hey, it would be interesting to see if let's say optimistically he did have a lot to do with the treatment of this or the script or the at least the idea. I would be interested to see in what he thought was the logical conclusion. And of
Yeah.
course, we haven't even seen the one he had like 2 movies after Land of the Dead that I haven't even seen. There was like a Hatfields versus McCoy's
Yep.
one. I forget what that was called, like Diary of the Dead or something along those lines.
I think I kind of watched that, but it wasn't that like the found footage one.
That we had that was I'm thinking of that. That's yeah, right. That's the title of the found footage one. And then I think there was another one, Survival of the Dead, maybe something along those lines. Either way, they weren't getting better and better as they went.
Right. And I guess that's part of where I'm maybe having some doubts, especially since we keep hearing about this and nothing is really
Yeah.
coming of any of these projects. But again, of course, I will check it out if it actually eventually makes it out there. And I do like the idea of the premise, but we'll have to see. I mean, I think this is something like the 4th or 5th article we've seen this being teased, but no sort of information about production or, any of that. So I guess we'll have to wait and see, and they'll just keep teasing it forever. So, um, and then last but not least, there's the Fantasia Film Festival,
Which
and
I think just closed a week or two ago. Um, yeah, the big news from this is there is a zombie comedy that's coming out of it that some people are saying was good. I haven't read the reviews because I don't want to get spoiled, but
yep.
it's been reviewed on AV Club and another iHorror, I think, and it seemed like it was quite positive. Um, the main cast announcement is like one of the guys from The Boys, but not like a main character. One of the guy with like the 20-foot long mutant penis is an actor in this show or movie, and it's called We Are Zombies.
We Are Zombies. Yep.
And it would be a horror comedy, and it's not available anywhere. I've looked around. I think because it just did the festival thing, it closed the Fantasia Film Festival. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see when it comes out. It's one of these things like, okay, we're getting a little bit of a note of it here, and then we have to keep looking for it.
Yeah, but it looks pretty good, and everybody gave it pretty decent reviews, so I'm excited to check it out. I also didn't want to read too much about it, just given the spoilery piece of that,
Yeah,
because we're
right.
giving pretty so just as a heads up, this particular article gives you a lot of a lot of details. So you may, if you don't want to be spoiled, probably don't take a look at it until after. Though I have to say, some of the other films that they are talking about that premiered at the film festival, some of these look pretty cool. Obviously not all zombie related, but a lot of sci-fi stuff that is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I might check out a few of these on my own anyway.
And this is a roundup of the Fantasia Film Festival third wave
Mhm.
at from Bloody Disgusting, which is a great source of information about horror. So yeah, do check that out. Do. And that's it for the like main news. There, like we've talked about, there's a fair amount of other little stuff out there. The other one that kind of dropped right after, I think it was right after we did our last episode, was that Dead City has been renewed for season 2, which I'm kind of surprised by. We haven't gotten through season 1, but I kind of assumed for some dumb reason that these were all going to be one shots, like one
Yeah,
season, and then we're done.
yeah, so did I. So I was a little surprised as well, but apparently not. And maybe they just saw, hey, this is going well. I mean, look, I think that these two characters are beloved. So people are always excited to see more of them.
Oh, yes.
But sorry for I'm just so tired.
It's
So
been it's been a long month for Conrad over here. It's been a long month.
it has been. But
How many
anyway,
how many days off have you had in the last 30 days?
more than I've had like some partial days, so that's fine.
That's good.
And it's just nonstop. But this is yeah. So but anyway,
So we're talking about Dead City season 1. We can say that now. Episode
and
3.
talk about that. And I had to rewatch episode 3 because it was so long since I had
Yeah,
actually it.
same. Same.
But
This episode is entitled "People Are a Resource," and this is actually kind of a funny thing that they called it that, because the meaning has changed so much from when Negan used to say it to when the Croat says it. We can talk about that when we get there, but I thought that was quite amusing. This is directed by Kevin Dowling and written by Keith Staskowitz. Staskowitz, yeah, pretty close. And so, HA, what were your overall impressions? If you want to start there, or if you want to start at the very beginning.
I mean, I think we can start at the beginning, but I have some observations about this that again, I'm finding some of the things that they are choosing to do with this series problematic, specifically as it relates to Negan's character. Where we left off, Negan and Maggie are now banding together sort of with this group of people that are fighting the Croat. And this is a group of people that basically are New Yorkers that got caught in the apocalypse. They form their own tribe, so to speak. And this is they are like kind of the only resistance, I guess, to the Croats crew. There's some distrust, and Negan and Maggie are doing their Negan and Maggie thing. But I guess part of the thing is like, from your point of view, Stuart, and I don't know, like one of the things that I find a little bit confusing is if this group, if the Croat is as scary and terrifying as he is, this group is small, like I don't know that they're gonna be so like excited about going up against somebody so powerful.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this is like a big problem with the script of this episode.
Yeah, and then there's also other things that I'm like, like really, really confused by or kind of disappointed by, I guess, in terms of storytelling.
On that point, though, if I can also dig into that, this like faction war, they've also really only been presented as like trying to survive, with the Croat Barazzi chasing and hunting them down, right? Like there hasn't been we're going to go out and raid Barazzi today. No, they're just like, we're running away from them and finding new places to live. I think that the establishment of like, we're all native New Yorkers and they're all from out of town, or the bridge and tunnel crew, I think they even say
Yeah,
in
they do
this
say that,
episode,
and I'm like,
it's pretty freaking laughable that they're using that sort of language in this 15 years after the zombie apocalypse, or even longer at this point. It's pretty silly, but I don't know if that's just like hey, people of the present world, this is it's a joke. And then as you've already alluded to, why are they willing to, because a part of this episode is them persuading this band of New Yorkers to attack the Barazzi encampment, and it doesn't take very much to persuade them to do it. And when Luther, the big dude with the facial scar, is like, why should we do this, Maggie's response is, for my child, to save my child, save my son. That's not a reason for any of them to do any, like
Why
they
are they
should
there?
die for her son. Like, what? This
And
doesn't
then
make any sense to
they have
me.
no loyalty to her whatsoever. And then there's the other part of this that, again, I'm like, and they're kind of trying to explain it, but this whole group of people is there. Okay. They're surviving. Okay. Croat shows up.
And
Okay.
there's like 10 or less of them, right? There's not
Yeah,
a
but
lot of people.
it's not a lot of people. And by the way, it's not a lot of people to get out of Manhattan, even though they say, oh, it's so impossible. It's like whatever. Well, guess what? Manhattan's huge and you could get off that island since people can clearly get on. And they make these kind of blanket statements like, oh, you can get on, but you can't get off. The Barazzi are not that big and they're not all knowing and they're not all seeing. Unless there's some really insane security thing here, like, which I doubt. It just feels a little bit too convenient. And again, I don't believe that if you're being hunted by this crazy group of people, like, why would you stay? So there's some sort of implausibility here that I just am struggling with, and again, kind of disappointed by, because I don't think it's necessary to have all these sort of artificial things kind of built in. I think a more interesting plot would have been that they're trying to like figure out a plan to get off the island or figure out a plan to like get anywhere. They make this like comment about all the bridges and tunnels being blown up. Well, apparently you can get there in a cooler. So let's
Yeah.
talk about that. But and so there's stuff like that that I'm just like, it's to me, and again, this is the Fear the Walking Dead issue, which is there are some very easy ways to fix this. Like, it doesn't have to be this way. So I find it a little bit upsetting and annoying that like it's, to me, it's again very lazy storytelling. But
It's
you know,
also pretty crazy. Like, yeah, having just gone on a boat all the way around Manhattan like last week, there's like 19 bridges just on the east side. There's not a lot on the west side to get across the Hudson, I guess, but there are those tunnels. It feels like what the military, yeah, I guess they would have bombed even the pedestrian bridge that goes between what the Bronx and whatever's on the other side of the river from the Bronx, Washington
right,
Heights.
but you're also assuming that they would have had the power and wherewithal to do this in the middle of chaos. Like,
Yeah.
would they? I don't know. That's the thing that I find a little strange. And then the Croat clearly has no problem going out and raiding since he was going out to get Maggie's son. But I also find that story a little odd. Like, why would you go through all the effort to go
Yeah.
out, raid, and bring back random hostages? I mean,
Well,
just because
I
you're
feel like that's a story that we have to learn about more. They can't just make that be random, right?
right, but and I'm hoping that they can't, but it just feels like a little too stupid. So anyway, we'll have to see what happens with that. Maybe it was targeted, who knows, but it just feels there's a lot of thin storytelling here that I would like to kind of have certain things cleared up, but maybe we'll get more to that. We haven't gotten to it in season 3 other than to have some very unsatisfactory explanations in my view.
So other than those sort of super weak elements of this episode, mostly in the motivation of the good people, the good team. I'm not sure what to call them. I forget. I think they did have a name for them in one of the showrunner speeches at the end of the episode earlier, but I've forgotten what they are. The New Yorkers, we'll call them. This episode has a lot of Ginny and Negan development. Mostly, a lot of it's through flashback, but it's also like set to Ginny leaving, or she had already run away from not Kingtop Hilltop, taking a motorcycle and arrives at the coast to cross into New York. And so we have some flashbacks though of her and Negan on one day in particular in the woods, and he's talking about her lack of how she's incommunicative, and he needs her to be able to signal to him. That's kind of like where that all goes. It's also about him. It's also about the show presenting us a Negan who is empathetic and sympathetic and who cares for people, because he also does something bad in this episode, let's say.
Does, but I mean, look, Negan's always had this, like, we saw his relationship with Judith, we saw his relationship with Lydia, like he's always had this thing, this protective thing, where he kind of tries to build his own little family, and specifically it's with, women but the thing that it's kind of weird about this whole thing, and again, it's a not thin story. They try to explain away why Annie and his son are nowhere to be found. And I don't think it's thin, but I think it's, maybe that's sort of showing what's going on. I mean, Negan, they try to explain some of the things with Negan's character about what happened with his wife. And that was an incredible episode to see the backstory with that.
With Lucille, his original wife. Yeah.
Yep. And so that plays into these things as well. I think Jeffrey Dean Morgan is a phenomenal actor, and I love watching him, and I think he's the strongest element of the show. But I also think that the storytelling is a little uneven because they keep trying to retread the same ground with this character, and they don't need to. And this is sort of the whole thing with the Negan Maggie feud and the things that we already have dealt with and gone over. And so they keep trying to retread this ground, which I think what would be more interesting is to see it evolve. I mean, maybe the point is that this character is just going to keep sort of repeating these patterns, but
But
it feels
then we're getting into Morgan territory. We don't need two characters who are like that. These yo-yo
right. And then
characters.
that's kind of what it feels like. And again, Fear the Walking Dead problem, right?
Yeah.
Like we just have this, and then honestly, it's kind of a similar thing with Rick, right? Like, so you keep sort of going over and over and over again, and the character's like crazy, the character's not. Like, the more interesting thing is to evolve the character into a place that's more interesting. And I was hoping that that's where this was going. Maybe it will, but it feels like they can't. It feels almost like they're like, oh, this is like some dark stuff about Negan that he's never going to sort of let up. But like, I don't. I think Negan is savvy and smart. I do not believe that he would do this with this character that we are talking about.
Luther or wait, who are we
Luther.
talking about? Yeah, the Luther interaction later is shocking. And I also wonder, like, what if Luther had approached Maggie instead of Negan with this, and how would that have gone? Because she has more to lose. I don't know. Kind of an interesting question, and maybe it would have been better if it had gone that way and Negan had to step in, or I don't know. Anyway,
But part of it, well, and we'll get to it, but
yeah,
part of it, well, let's talk about that when we get to it. But
let's,
so the biggest part of this is that like Maggie and Negan talking to the tribe, figuring out where they think Herschel is, which is weirdly in Madison Square Garden. It doesn't surprise me that they make this the sort of hellhole that the Croat is shacked up in, because Madison Square Garden is definitely a hellhole. Uh, and Penn Station. And so that's kind of funny, and kind of an insider joke because all New Yorkers hate Madison Square Garden. um, and it's kind of a cool idea because there is a lot of like underground tunnels. There's the old Penn Station. There's a lot of like infrastructure in there. So like I did like that idea of this story.
yeah.
But it's also the thing about Madison Square Garden is that it's easy to get in but very hard to get out of. Like it definitely makes sense in terms of this kind of an idea that it would be a fortress. So I thought that was pretty funny. And they're looking at it, but again, this seems weird, don't you? Like this group of people that they're gonna like make this plan with 10 people to get into this place against like hordes of zombies and walkers and
Yeah.
this group of insane people. I don't know. Like it doesn't feel like this makes sense that they would band together at all with
No,
Maggie.
it doesn't. It doesn't work. We've also, by this point in the plot, had Negan talking about how, without revealing that he was in charge of the Saviors, he tells the story of the Saviors and how they were taken down. That like he sets up Maggie to like dunk kind of with his story about how the saviors were beaten by the oppressed.
Mm-hmm.
What I feel like he's not saying in that is that they were basically outnumbered by multiple communities.
Right, like a
Is that
lot of people.
a lot
Like,
of people? Then this is not the scenario that we are looking at here in this show. So I feel like it's a little bit of a false equivalence. But if Maggie and Negan are just like blatantly taking advantage of these idiots to sacrifice themselves for her teenager,
right.
okay, I guess then that's what the show is about. It does not make me think that they are heroic by any stretch of the imagination, but it feels like they're going to be all sacrificed for Maggie's familial bonds.
And the
uh,
big thing is, what is his name? Tommaso
yeah,
has been in the Madison Square Garden holding thing, and what he describes is very, I mean, it's almost, word for word similar to what Negan had set up with the Saviors. And like, I think we all remember when Daryl was held, and that is a very similar scenario where they're like kind of giving them creature comforts, or like carrot and stick
yeah.
scenarios, eventually just stick. Um, and somehow this guy managed to escape, again, slightly implausible. Walkers just somehow got in, and
Yeah.
he got away through underground tunnels that his grandfather told him about.
Okay. That's
But
because hey, that's the local New Yorker advantage right there.
I guess,
That's what he's talking about.
but the thing about this, that again, this is what sort of is annoying. How would he actually find a way back? Like, it's not like he knows the whole system like the back of his hand. It sounds like he got out almost by luck.
Well,
And
maybe in the future episode he'll go down there and be like, "Oh God, I have no fucking idea where I am."
maybe let's like, I hope so. But like, so there again, there's like a lot of like holes in this whole story, and that this is
Yeah.
the big plan. But also that Maggie and Negan would even need these people seems a little weird too. Like, they just need to know the possibility that there's tunnels there, I guess.
And
But
also against the backdrop of Tommaso's story of being a prisoner, we actually have Pearlie is a prisoner. Remember, he got rolled up by the Croat personally in one of those net traps and brought into Madison Square Garden. We get to see his like in processing. There's an actor on the Barazzi side who is just doing too much whenever she's on screen. She was in one of those scenes where Neckbeard and Rattail was being made fun of by Negan. She was standing behind him, making the same sort of weird, evil, surprised face.
he's very dramatic, and it's
And
so noticeable.
when Pearlie gets taken out of the ambulance or whatever he's in, she also just has this like, now she's evil and gleeful face. But yeah, she's doing way too much. I
No,
don't
it's
understand why nobody looked at that and was like, do like 50% of that.
yeah. But
Uh it's
I guess the
crazy.
other thing with Pearlie that's a little confusing as well is it's not like he's protecting anybody here. Um,
Well, yeah, I mean they try to explain this away in the after show talk where he's like anything he tells him will be used against him. I'm like maybe, but also
maybe, but it also seems like, I mean, true, Croat seems crazy, and that's true too.
but he's already
But
caught. I don't know, like what's he
he's
gonna
already caught, and like it doesn't seem to be getting any better. So I don't know. It just doesn't feel like he would have ended up where he did. So eventually, he goes through a lot of scenarios. I mean, I'm assuming that these scenes were mainly used to reveal more about the Croat than about Pearlie, although it
well,
does.
Pearlie doesn't talk, so yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
100% what they were for.
So it's all
Croat
like, oh, the Croat's
Croat talks a lot.
he doesn't like rotten meat. He kills this guy just because of that. Like, he kills like the guy who prepares the dinner because there was like a worm in the meat, and he's very
Well,
upset.
yeah, he's concerned about that. That was I'm like, where did they get this meat? Also, but I guess there are deer in the city. We've had that scene also some hunting.
Right, but if
Uh,
you cooked it, it wouldn't have
wouldn't
anyway.
have a maggot in it. Yeah, I don't know what piscatata is or whatever they're talking about. If it's like a beef tartare scenario, I don't feel like that's what I would be eating in the zombie apocalypse. I'd have everything well done.
I think you'd be cooking the crap out of everything. Like,
Yeah,
be hockey puck meat time.
yeah.
No rare meat in this apocalypse. But I like there is, and again, this is very much like this whole savior scenario where you see these creature comforts that he's got set up in some kind of luxury booth in Madison Square Garden. And, and then again, I think this is just to reveal all the stuff that the Croat does or has in store, and to show how, sadistic he is, and how the Barazzi are fully in support of him. So, they put Pearlie into like a Thunderdome situation with some walkers, and a walker specifically that has the key, the one that had done the rotten meat. And, again, it just keeps getting worse and worse for Pearlie. And he even gets kind of drugged with gas before he gets thrown in there. Um, and then ultimately, when he survives, and I don't have a doubt that he would survive, like I think he's pretty scrappy.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole thing with the Croat, where he like discovers some letter in the boot of Pearlie, and that this would somehow break Pearlie, it feels a little too much
There's a
to
lot
me.
about all this that's too much. I mean, Pearlie beats up 3 zombies with a shoe and only hits 2 of them one time. Like he brains, like, this is, to me, this is like just really taking out the zombie as a threat when you can just hit him with a shoe and they die. Like,
Well,
huh?
they were pretty heavy shoes, but I guess my thing about that is, why wouldn't you just take the legs out from under them and stomp on their heads, which would make a lot more sense, no?
And
Um,
yeah,
if you
but
have that
he
kind of heavy duty shoe, probably.
maybe
I don't know. It felt very over the top, kind of dumb, and
before this octagon scene. Also, this is where the Croat is like yelling at his supporters and getting that Doma Smo chant going, and then saying, here's to our fallen comrade, who they put in a tank of something with hoses coming out of it and gas masks that they're about to dose Pearlie with. And this is where he goes, because he's going to provide something for us because people are a resource, and he yells that and everybody cheers. And I'm just like, that is not what Negan meant when he said it. But for him, of course, he's making decomposing bodies into gas, like not only methane gas that you can breathe and people seem to be huffing, which is weird, but also to power vehicles and generators. So that's kind of
and I
his whole
forgot
thing.
and I forgot to mention, like, the whole big reveal that we see in the scene in the luxury suite with Pearlie is the Croat talking about his backstory, which is very similar to Negan's, in that his wife and his daughters were taken out by walkers, and then he found Negan, and then he reveals that he's a alternative energy expert. So it's to fill in a lot of this story here, and why he's able to figure out all this methane to energy conversion. Um, so I don't
Yeah.
know. Feels again a bit too convenient. But they're certainly trying to draw parallels between him and Negan.
Yeah.
Uh,
Except slightly different interpretations of the of
correct.
of the mantra. So yeah, when Pearlie finally gives in, he reveals that he's there to get Negan, and that's kind of where that episode ends, actually, with him saying that. But I feel like we've also had other scenes before we get there, such as the Luther Negan interaction,
Yeah.
and
Well,
the bag lady, and there's some other stuff with Ginny also.
let's talk a little bit about the group of the tribal people and Negan and Maggie, and we see their kind of weird traditions, which, Negan and Maggie have never been here before. They don't know what's going on, and they all sit down for like a dinner, and there's all this weird humming going on and people putting things out. And like, I guess you could glean what this is about, but as an outsider, it feels a little odd. That this is, I guess, their prayer session. I don't know. They're grieving. And they do talk about this after this episode, and I'm like, yeah, but you're making so many assumptions. Like, I don't know, this felt a little odd. And then the whole evolution with the discussion about breaking into Madison Square Garden, and how they're going to help, and all of that stuff felt a little forced and unrealistic, because I just don't think that this group would. Um, and the only person that they have kind of really questioning is Luther. Luther is definitely against any kind of like assault upon the Croat, because he's protective of them. And to me, he seems like the only reasonable person in this crowd.
Yeah, which condemns him to death. Like the fact that he's the only one asking, why should we sacrifice, or well, like, why should we risk our lives for you? And Maggie's response, of course, is what I've already said, is it's for my son. And nobody says anything like, what? So what? Like Luther says, you know, that your son's probably already dead, which we know as an audience that he's not. At least we
But
don't
she
think he
doesn't,
is.
and he's not like drawing that conclusion isn't unrealistic, right? Like,
It's
so
right because all their people who have been captured by the Barazi and do end up dead. Uh, it it does raise the question, like, why
yeah.
is he keeping him alive? Does he know the connection to Negan? We're not sure. We'll find out, hopefully. But yeah, nobody else is challenging them on this idea. They're way too eager and also like resigned to die. It's hard to put it together. Ginny, however, has escaped into New York with her, or crossed over into New York with her cooler boat,
Also,
wandering the streets.
can we talk about Ginny's hair for a second?
What's is it too clean?
Both too clean, but also too big and too long, and like some kid that's actually surviving this apocalypse. I just don't like it is blown out in certain places,
Mhm.
and it's going through that weird apocalypse makeup thing that they sometimes do where they try kind of to make it look a little dirty, but it's not. It's like definitely styled and also a huge liability,
Yeah.
like for people to grab her. So I don't know. That really stood out to me in so many scenes in this whole thing. And the idea that she would go in this cooler when we saw all the walker bodies that are still definitely kicking in this cooler feels a little
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Well,
So
they don't show her crossing. They just show her like setting off and then arriving. So you don't
you
have to
show her
see
in the
her.
water in a minute. So I guess maybe she could paddle through some walkers, but it feels a little bit like that would be very difficult in a
Yeah.
cooler.
Yeah. I mean, the walkers we saw when Maggie and Negan were crossing were alive, but they were just kind of floating. They weren't like grabbing as far as we saw.
Yeah, but
But
if
yeah,
you're like
in
in
a
the water,
cooler, top heavy, it wouldn't take much to get
right?
capsized. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she has arrived in New York. She's dropped her dinosaur, which was part of the plot of flashbacks with her and Negan too. Like she's attached to this stuffed animal. A person picks it up and puts it in a bag and wanders away. And I guess she follows that person because we see that she is, and that person turns out to be a New Yorker,
Mhm.
a long lost friend of Tommaso's. And Ginny has followed her and apparently is looking at Maggie also toward the end of this episode. Maggie has seen the dinosaur, asked for it or taken it from the lady with the bags, and was about to set it on fire.
Yeah, because like, and again, I don't believe that Maggie would do this. I
Why?
don't. She would.
What's the motive? I don't even understand
As
why.
one, you get to know Ginny's there and distract him, but
Oh my
Maggie would
god.
never. Maggie would never do that. That's the thing. I don't believe she would do that, and I guess they're showing that maybe she's not. But I think Maggie would be like, "Hey, Ginny's out there somewhere, and we got to find her." Right? So I just don't buy this. This seems very weird to me. So, and again, I guess we'll find out more. But Ginny's watching Maggie debating, like, you know,
This honestly, I had not put that together. That is an interesting, and maybe the guy was even talking about it after the show, but I wasn't really, I was half listening to him. What a fascinating turn for Maggie's character.
hey,
She was making a lot of bad calls in the end of last season of The Walking Dead. And maybe this is just like the culmination of her bad decision making, is actually becoming more than half evil.
yeah. Well, I mean, I guess again, I think this is what they're trying to do is
Yeah.
to draw parallels with the Negan character and that Maggie doesn't really have a leg to stand on. And again, back to the issue I'm having with all the way they keep retreading this ground. It's like, oh, let's make Maggie more crazy and irrational when it's convenient versus
Yeah.
let's evolve this character in a way that's kind of cool. This isn't cool. This is stupid. I just don't believe she would do this, and I don't like believe the weird tension between her and Negan. And then now they're throwing this other wrench into it with Negan where he gets, this is the big thing we were talking about before. He gets confronted by Luther in like this kitchen area thing. And Luther is basically like, we're not going to help you. And, you need to leave and all this stuff. And it culminates into a fight with them. And do I believe that if Negan's life were threatened, he would do whatever he needs to survive? Yes. But I also think that he understands that this group, they need them a little bit on their side or whatever. So I feel like he would have taken, I think he would have like left. I don't think he would have engaged here.
Well,
And
wasn't he trying to leave? This is what I didn't understand. Like, why did Luther keep blocking him?
and it
He's like,
seems,
you have to leave, and then
yeah.
doesn't let him leave. I'm like, I don't understand how
Well,
this is
Negan's
going.
basically like, I'm not gonna do that. And so then it gets into this thing that doesn't seem believable, though. You know, I think he could, I mean, Negan's pretty swift and quick. I think he could sort of dodge Luther, who doesn't seem incredibly quick. And instead it gets into this stupid thing with them, and he kills Luther, and not only kills him, but like really kills him in this like stupid Negan way. Like,
I'm
meaning,
sorry, the vegetable grater across the
come
forehead had
on,
me
I was so
wincing.
annoyed.
Oh, I was like, oh god, that's
Yeah,
terrible.
that's just ridiculous. They were like, oh, let's give this like the anyway, I was really annoyed by it. But anyway, that's where we are. So I'm sure hilarity will ensue once people figure out that he killed Luther, or because, I mean, I guess he could try to hide that body, but it's a pretty big body to drag out of there.
And Luther's like 10% of the group of New Yorkers, and he was the
Right,
guy doing all the singing at their ritual.
right.
He's like their priest, or I don't know what the hell.
I don't
So it
know.
doesn't feel like they're gonna just be like, oh yeah, oh Luther's not around. Okay, we'll just go anyway. I feel like they would be like, we're not leaving until we find Luther. But
Right. And then the Luther cover up has to happen, where I guess he can't be a walker because I guess his brain's gone. But like it just seems, again, annoying, and we'll have to see what happens next. But right now I'm really just not on board with what they're doing. So we'll see if they can turn it around. So I guess more to come as we watch the next episode. Have you watched ahead?
no, I haven't had a lot of time. Um,
I have
but
not.
well, so maybe you finished watching Dead City many moons ago, like we should have. But we're savoring every bite we can get of zombie content these days.
So to speak. Yes.
So let us know what you think of this episode of People Are a Resource. Did it seem a little silly? Did it seem right on the mark? Holler at us. You can email us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. But you can also find all of our episodes at reanimated.podbean.com.
Great. And until next time, ciao.
Alrighty, toodles.